We need such mementos to remind us of our former state, but we grow proud and cease to appreciate our present comforts. Our first Sabbath was celebrated in the open air, my pulpit a pile of rude logs, my church the deep shade of the forest beneath which we assembled ourselves; but sincerer or more fervent devotion I never witnessed than that day. I well remember the text I chose for my address to them was from the 8th chapter of Deuteronomy, the 6th, 7th, and 9th verses, which appeared to me applicable to our circumstances. The following year we raised a small blockhouse, which served as a schoolhouse and church. At first our progress in clearing the land was slow, for we had to buy experience, and many and great were the disappointments and privations that befell us during the first few years. One time we were all ill with ague, and not one able to help the other. This was a sad time, but better things were in store for us. The tide of emigration increased, and the little settlement we had formed began to be well spoken of. One man came and built a saw mill, a grist mill followed soon after, and then one store, and then another, till we beheld a flourishing village spring up around us. Then the land began to increase in value, and many of the first settlers sold their lots to advantage, and retreated further up the woods. As the village increased, so, of course, did my professional duties, which had for the first few years been paid for in acts of kindness and voluntary labour by my little flock; and now I have the satisfaction of reaping a reward without proving burdensome to my parishioners. My farm is increasing, and besides the salary arising from my curacy, I have something additional for the school, which is paid by government. We may now say it is good for us to be here, seeing that God has been pleased to send down a blessing upon us. I have forgotten many very interesting particulars relating to the trials and shifts this family were put to in the first few years, but the pastor told us enough to make me quite contented with my lot, and I returned home after some days' pleasant sojourn with this delightful family with an additional stock of contentment, and some useful and practical knowledge that I trust I shall be the better for all my life. I am rather interested in a young lad that has come out from England to learn Canadian farming. The poor boy had conceived the most romantic notions of a settler's life, partly from the favourable accounts he had read, and partly through the medium of a lively imagination, which had aided in the deception, and led him to suppose that his time would be chiefly spent in the fascinating amusements and adventures arising from hunting the forest in search of deer and other game, pigeon and duck shooting, spearing fish by torchlight, and voyaging on the lakes in a birch bark canoe in summer, skating in winter, or gliding over the frozen snow like a Laplander in his sleigh, wrapped up to the eyes in furs, and travelling at the rate of 12 miles an hour to the sound of a harmonious peal of bells. What a felicitous life to captivate the mind of a boy of 14, just let loose from the irksome restraint of boarding school! How little did he dream of the drudgery inseparable from the duties of a lad of his age, in a country where the old and young, the master and the servant, are alike obliged to labour for a livelihood, without respect to former situation or rank. Here the son of the gentleman becomes a hewer of wood and drawer of water; he learns to chop down trees, to pile brush heaps, split rails for fences, attend the fires during the burning season, dressed in a coarse over garment of hempen cloth, called a logging shirt, with trousers to correspond, and a Yankee straw hat flapped over his eyes, and a handspike to assist him in rolling over the burning brands. To tend and drive oxen, plough, sow, plant Indian corn and pumpkins, and raise potato hills, are among some of the young emigrant's accomplishments. His relaxations are but comparatively few, but they are seized with a relish and avidity that give them the greater charm. You may imagine the disappointment felt by the poor lad on seeing his fair visions of amusement fade before the dull realities and distasteful details of a young settler's occupation in the backwoods. Youth, however, is the best season for coming to this country. The mind soon bends itself to its situation, and becomes not only reconciled, but in time pleased with the change of life. There is a consolation, too, in seeing that he does no more than others of equal pretensions as to rank and education are obliged to submit to, if they would prosper; and perhaps he lives to bless the country which has robbed him of a portion of that absurd pride that made him look with contempt on those whose occupations were of a humble nature. It were a thousand pities wilfully to deceive persons desirous of emigrating with false and flattering pictures of the advantages to be met with in this country. Let the pro and con be fairly stated, and let the reader use his best judgment, unbiassed by prejudice or interest in a matter of such vital importance, not only as regards himself, but the happiness and welfare of those over whose destinies with nature has made him the guardian. It is, however, far more difficult to write on the subject of emigration than most persons think. It embraces so wide a field that would be perfectly correct as regards one part of the province would by no means prove so as regarded another. One district differs from another, and one township from another, according to its natural advantages, whether it be long settled or unsettled, possessing water privileges or not. The soil and even the climate will be different according to situation and circumstances. Much depends on the tempers, habits, and dispositions of the emigrants themselves. What suits one will not another. One family will flourish and accumulate every comfort about their homesteads, while others languish in poverty and discontent. It would take volumes to discuss every argument for and against, and to point out exactly who are and who are not fit subjects for emigration. Have you read Dr. Dunlop's spirited and witty Backwoodsman? If you have not, get it as soon as you can; it will amuse you. I think a Backwoods woman might be written in the same spirit, setting forth a few pages in the history of bush ladies, as examples for our sex. Indeed, we need some wholesome admonitions on our duties and the folly of repining at following and sharing the fortunes of our spouses, whom we have vowed in happier hours to love, in riches and in poverty, in sickness and in health. Too many pronounce these words without heeding their importance, and without calculating the chances that may put their faithfulness to the severe test of quitting home, kindred, and country, to share the hard lot of a settler's life; for even this sacrifice renders it hard to be borne, but the truly attached wife will do this and more also, if required by the husband of her choice. But now it is time I say farewell. My dull letter, grown to a formidable packet, will tire you, and make you wish it at the bottom of the Atlantic. End of Letter 15.